Thank you so much. Shalom Lechem. Erev Tov, good evening. Thank you so much for having me back here. Bezrat Hashem Yitbarach.
Recording in progress.
Bezrat Hashem, if I'm back here, that means that last week was not so bad. So, Baruch Hashem, we're here. I'm very excited to be learning with you Hilchot Pesach. Unlike last week's shiur, this week's shiur is a little bit less sensational, but 100 times more practical. So my hope is that you'll walk away from today's shiur knowing a lot more than you did before, but more than that, you should look at that picture that we put out on the flyer of all the aluminum foil on the countertop, and you should realize that's definitely not what the conclusion of this shiur is going to be. You're not going to have to live in a spaceship for Pesach. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. But one step at a time. When I first came to the yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and I began studying with Mori Rab Yaakov Peretz, he should live and be well. Every professor, every teacher always tells you at the beginning of a course what the goal of the course is. And Mori Harav told me, the goal of this course, of becoming a rabbi and studying the laws of kashrut, is that you should be able to go in any place, at any time, to the home of someone who is not Jewish, use the ingredients from their refrigerator and the pots and pans in their kitchen, and make for yourself a meal that is 100% kasher. And if you don't know how to do that, it's because you don't actually know the laws of kashrut. And from here I learned something important. And that is that a person only knows something when they know it well. It's what Albert Einstein once said, that if you're not able to explain something complicated very simply, it means you don't truly understand it. When I see the way that people speak about kashrut, the way people speak about Pesach, I realize that nobody actually knows what they're looking out for. Nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. And so much of what they're doing doesn't come from a lack of education. It comes from complete misinformation as to what is chametz, what is Pesach, how does it work. I'm going to give you a mashal, an example. And I don't remember anymore which class I say what, so if I repeat myself from last time, please forgive me. I speak of no politics, and I don't have a stance on anything. During Corona here in the Beit Knesset, we all wore masks and followed social distancing rules like the government required. But I remember seeing someone very interesting. I was finishing to give a shiur. It was 10 o'clock at night. I came out to the parking lot, and I see an old lady driving in her car, alone. The windows are closed. She's alone. It's 10 o'clock at night. And she's wearing 2 masks and a plastic face shield in her car. And I looked at her, and it was very surprising to me. I said, what is she afraid of in her car? And then I realized very quickly, this lady knows she's supposed to be scared of something, but she has no understanding of what it is that she's supposed to be scared of, how a person can catch it, how this transfers, how it spreads. And I see this happen in the realm of Pesach every single year. I come inside of a kitchen, and here's what I see. I see all kinds of aluminum foil, contact paper, double layers on the countertops, on the cabinets. I see the faucet where the water comes out. I see it covered with a sock and it's duct tape. I see people scrubbing the tables down with bleach. I see people doing all kinds of things. And I look around and I say, I know you think you're doing something important. You think that you're getting ready for Pesach, but I don't think you actually know what you're doing. I'll tell you a story. When early on in my marriage, I became an interesting address for some of the members of my wife's Hasidic family. One of the family members, a distant family member, called me up. And she said, Rabbi, I got married to this guy who comes from a certain Hasidut. And it's a week before Pesach. She was 8.5 months pregnant. And he said his mother has a custom. Then not only does she put aluminum foil all over the kitchen for Pesach, but also in the bedrooms, on the shelves where the clothing goes, she puts aluminum foil. And he expects me to respect his mother's tradition and put aluminum foil there. And if you think I'm making up the story, the Rabbanit is here, she was on that phone call. And I don't know what to say. What do you say? What could be in your bedroom? Maybe the pants that you wore once had chametz, and you put it in the washing machine, and the chametz still didn't come out. So maybe you put it on the shelf, and then maybe you're going to cook yourself a meal in your closet in your bedroom, so maybe that's why they need aluminum foil on the counter. I'm trying to judge them favorably. And here's what I told her. I said, my dearest family member, you're 8.5 months pregnant. If your husband has a minhag that he wants to aluminum foil the walls of the garage, it doesn't matter. He can do whatever he wants. It's not worth fighting over it. But he should go do it. Why do you have to do it? What kind of man is going to send his wife 8.5 months pregnant to start putting aluminum foil over everything? He can respect his mother's tradition. He should do it. Not you. Mori Harav, Yaakov Peretz came to his home once and he saw there was aluminum foil on one of the countertops. And he told his wife, Rabbanit, tell me, the aluminum foil is here on the countertop because of Pesach or because you think it looks nice? Rabbanit Peretz is a very wise lady. She says, Harav, what's the difference? He said, well, if you're doing it because of Hilchot Pesach, there's no such thing, I'm going to rip it off the countertops. But if you're doing it because you want to decorate the house, this is your house, you can decorate it however you want. So she said, don't worry, I'm doing it for the decoration. He said, great. And he walked away. There's no point in Pesach which we're supposed to be fighting with each other. But it's very important and it's very helpful to us to make sure that when we observe this holiday, we do it according to the rules of halajá. Today's shiur is about hechsher kelim. How to make all of our utensils, everything you have in your home, how to make them Kasher LePesah. How I can use everything from my oven to my blender to my toaster to my sinks and my pots and my pans and my plates and my refrigerator and whatever else you have in your kitchen. What do we need to know in order to make it Kasher LePesah? And I'm going to tell you the truth. If you want to log off right now, I have added here on page 12 of the source sheet, I added 4 pages from my book, Yehi Shalom, on the laws of Pesach. You can even skip the first one and just read. It says here, pots, pans, grills, ovens, microwaves, toaster ovens, how you make them kasher. You don't even have to listen to anything I'm going to say today. So what's the point of the first 14 pages of the source sheet? First 12 pages of the source sheet? It's very simple. I don't want you to know what to do because I told you what to do. I want you to know what to do because you know what to do. Because you understand how this works and why it works the way it works. And so today I'm going to spend most of the time studying everything we need to know to understand the equation. Not the details, the equation. When I put in X and I put in Y, what comes out at the end? When I plug in A and B, what is C? I don't need to teach you all the details. You're going to already have Baruch Hashem. Hashem blessed you with your own intellect. But I want to sit with you now and understand from the beginning, from the sources, from the origins. How does something become chametz? How do we make it back to be kasher? This doesn't only apply to chametz and Pesach. This applies to meat and milk. This applies to kasher and non-kasher in general, pigs, non-kasher meats, anything else. How do our utensils in our kitchen become not kasher? What is the process to make them kasher? And what do I need to do this year for Pesach? So with your permission, I ask that you go to shiviti.org/Ibn Sefarad, like the name of the organization, and you will find the source sheet, 16 pages, attached as a PDF over there. If somebody here is a little tech savvy and you can add it to the chat box, please feel free to do that so everyone can have it. A reminder, tonight is a shiur, it's not a lecture, and therefore if there's something you want to know, you can't keep going forward without knowing it, please unmute yourself and ask. Don't write it in the chat box. I don't see the chat box now when I'm teaching. If it's something that can wait until the end of the shiur, like last week, I will sit here until the end of the night to make sure that all of your questions are answered. B'ezrat Hashem, I'm on page 1, source 1. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol biyado. A good place to start is the Torah. You know, it's a good place to start. I know most people, they start later places, but Torah is a good place. I'll tell you a story. If I'm anyway speaking about Hasidim, I should say something good about the Hasidim while I'm talking about it. When I first met my wife, on our first date, we didn't really have much to talk about. We don't have anything in common in terms of backgrounds or communities or anything of the like. So we got stuck on speaking about the Kotsk Rebbe, one of the famous Hasidic Rebbes. In the Beit Midrash of Kotsk, there was a young man by the last name of Eger. Rabbi Leibele Eger was his name. Rabbi Leibele Eger, he had come from a Lithuanian family. He was the son or the grandson of Rabbi Akiva Eger, the famous commentary in the Talmud. And he had decided to become a Hasid. They told him to go to Kotsk. So he went to Kotsk and he was studying Torah there. And he was learning. And about 6 months into his time there, he realized there's nothing special about this Hasidut. The Hasidim don't learn as well as his grandfather did. They don't know Gemara as well. It was better to just go back where he came from. So he made a decision. After Yom Kippurim, he was going to go back to his family, and he was going to rejoin the community which he came from. It was the night after Kal Nidre, so they just finished praying Kal Nidre in the Beit HaKnesset. It's Yom Kippurim. He sits down to study. And one of the Kotzker Chassidim said, Leibele, I heard you're leaving. I says, yeah. Why are you leaving? It's because there's nothing special here. I didn't learn anything over here. He said, okay, well, if you're leaving, we might as well make a l'chaim before you go. He takes out a bottle of vodka, and he pours him a shot. He says, Leibele l'chaim. He says, are you crazy? It's Yom Kippurim tonight. Don't you know Shulhan Aruj says you can't drink on Yom Kippurim? He says, Leibele, you and your Shulhan Aruj. So he pours the other guy a cup. Says, let's drink a l'chaim. So you guys out of your mind? The Gemara says you're not allowed to drink on Yom Kippurim. He says, Leibele, you and your Gemara, you're such a religious guy. Get over yourself. They pick up the glasses. They start to make a l'chaim. He says, guy, don't you know it says in the Torah that a person who eats in Yom Kippurim, that their soul will get cut off? It's an isur karet, excommunication in heaven. He says, yeah, you and your biblical prohibitions. Who cares? And he starts saying, Baruch atah, they're about to say a blessing on the cup of vodka. And he says, you guys have lost it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the creator of the universe, says that you're not allowed to drink on Yom Kippurim. How can you drink? He said, Rav Leibele, it took you 6 months to learn that the reason we do things in Judaism, the reason we observe halajá, is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to. Not because of the Shulchan Aruch, not because of the Rambam, not because of the Gemara. We're servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think sometimes when we learn Torah, people always tell me, you know, the Rambam says this, the Ramban says that, the Ritba, the Rashba, the Mishnah Be'ura, all of the poskim they tell me. Sometimes you ask, what does the Kadosh Baruch Hu say? Look at the way people study Musar. They want to tell me the Moreh Nevuchim says this, Mesilat Yesharim says that, Kuzari says this, Uchot Tzadikim Derech Hashem. But what about HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What does he say? You ever learned Yirmiyahu? Yechezkel? Yeshayahu? Ko amar Adonai. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. Vayidevar Adonai elai lemor. The word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to me saying, for some reason in the world we live in, everybody skips what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, and they just end up wherever they want to study. It's important that we always focus. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want? So, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? In the book of Bamidbar, the Jewish people are going to war against the nation of Midian. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows they're going to win that war, they're going to conquer things, and they're going to bring back pots and pans and all the things that they got in war. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen. El Anshe HaTzava. Elazar HaKohen speaks to the men of the Jewish army. Habayim LaMilchama, who are coming to war. Zot Chukat HaTorah. This is the law of the Torah. Asher Tziva Adonai et Moshe, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has commanded Moshe. Ach et HaZahav. ואת הכסף, את הנחושת, את הברזל, את הבדיל, ואת העופרת. He mentions here 7 different types of metal. Gold, silver, copper. כל דבר אשר יבוא באש, anything which was used in fire, תעבירו באש וטהר. Put it through the fire, and it will become pure. אך במי נידה יתחטא. But it must first be immersed in מי נידה. The waters of נידה is a mikveh. You should know, according to the literal meaning of the Torah, what is mei nida? Anybody know what mei nida is, literally? Where else do we use the term mei nida?
For the para aduma.
Very good, for the para aduma, kol hakavod. By the para aduma, so the Ramban here says this is referring to, not according to halajá, but according to what the text means, the ashes of the para aduma, of the red heifer. But that's not, Chachamim tell us that this mei nida is a mikveh. Very good, I'm impressed. V'chol asher lo yavo ba'esh, ta'aviru b'mayim. And everything which did not go through fire was cooked with, but it wasn't fire, put it through in water. So what is the Torah telling us? If you wish to make something kasher, there are 2 steps. One step is hechsher kelim or hachsharat kelim, and the next step is tevilat kelim. Let me very quickly mention to you about the difference between the two. Tevilat kelim, taking a utensil and putting it in the mikveh, does not make it kasher. This is not a law of kashrut. This is a law of tuma and tahara, purity and impurity. When we buy a utensil for food from a non-Jewish person, we must immerse it in a mikveh. That's new, that's old. It doesn't matter what the status is. As long as it's new to us, it goes in a mikveh. I'm not speaking about the laws of tevilat kelim. If you like, I have a shiur on YouTube, the laws of tevilat kelim. So anything you buy new for Pesach, metal and glass, you have to put it in the mikveh first, before you use it. Today we're talking about something else. all the metal, all the glass, all the utensils that you've used for other things, like chametz, how do you make them kasher LePesach? The Torah tells us the following. If it was used in fire, you make it kasher with fire. And if it was used with water, you make it kasher with water. In the words of our Chachamim, kivol'o kach poleto. The way that something absorbs flavor is the way that it releases flavor. Let's look at the Mishnah in source number 2. Halokach kli tashmish min hagoy. A person who takes maybe kli tashmish, or multiple utensils from the non-Jew. Et shedarko ladbil yadbil, lag'il yag'il, leben ba'ur yalben ba'ur. You make it kasher the way that it was used. That's what the Mishnah says. Our rabbis tell us the same thing in the Talmud, a general rule, in source number 3, that the way that something is used is the way that you make it kasher. Now this is a very simple halajá. So let's give an example. If I use a skewer for my kebabs, I put meat on it, I put it in the fire. Yeah? Let's say the kebab was not kasher. No, I didn't eat it. Someone else, I bought a skewer at the garage sale. Now I want to make it kasher. Very simple. From what you know now, how do you make it kasher?
In the fire.
You put it in the fire. Like it became not kasher in the fire, you put it back in the fire to make it kasher. Now all the details we didn't talk about. But mikveh, when do you go to the mikveh? Okay, mikveh is a separate halakha. Remember, I'm not talking today about mikvahot, but about making it kasher to get out the non-kasher flavor that was absorbed. Just like it absorbed non-kasher flavor in the fire, that's how you're going to take away the non-kasher flavor in the fire. Source number 4, bad flavor. Remember this halakha, because it's very much connected to what we studied together last week. Anything that is a bad flavor, it's pagum, does not affect the kashrut status of food. What is a bad flavor? Our Chachamim tell us, after 24 hours, any food that you left outside on the counter for 24 hours is already pagum. Think about it like this. You have a piece of chicken. You leave it on a plate on the counter. 24 hours later, would you eat that chicken? No. You shouldn't. If someone says yes, then no, don't do it. That chicken is pagum. Even if it does give flavor, that flavor that it gives is a spoiled flavor. It's a rotten flavor. From here comes very interesting logic. Look with me on page 2. Our Chachamim tell us in source number 5. Amar Rav Chia bered Rav Huna. Rav Chia, the son of Rav Huna, said, Lo asra Torah ela kdera bat yoma. The Torah only prohibited a pot that was used in the last 24 hours. Delav noten tam nifgamhu, because the flavor that it gives into the food is a good flavor. So if I use this pot for chicken soup, yes? Now the chicken soup flavor is absorbed in that pot. And if I want to make a dairy food inside of this pot, the pot will give good meat flavor into the dairy food, and that would make my food non-kasher. But after 24 hours, what is the status of the chicken that was absorbed in the pot? What's the status? It's pagum. So if it's pagum, what happens to the dairy food? Nothing. Nothing. According to the Torah, after 24 hours, all of the pots and pans in your kitchen, they reset themselves. They're kasher again. They're reset. They all become parve. So will you just tell me, let's get ready for Pesach. We won't use anything for 24 hours, and then everything will be good to go. Look what the Gemara says. Mikan ve'elach lishtere. So you should say, from here on out, it should be allowed to use this, the pots and pans in my kitchen. Gizera kedera she'ena bat yoma, mishum kedera bat yoma. Our rabbis made a rabbinic law, a decree, gzera, that we don't use pots and pans after 24 hours. Why? Because maybe we'll come to use them within 24 hours. The pot that's sitting on your counter, you remember that you used it yesterday. Did you calculate 23 and a half hours ago, or 23 and 45 minutes ago, or 24 and a half hours ago? Because people might come to make mistakes, our Chachamim made a rule. The rule is, we treat all pots and pans like they were used in the last 24 hours, because maybe you'll come to use a pot and pan within the 24 hours. So now let's make order. According to the Torah, you have to make a pot or pan kasher in the fire or in water, however it was used. According to our Chachamim, they agree. According to the Torah, pots and pans, ovens, whatever it is, become parve, neutral, kasher, after 24 hours. That means you go to a non-Jewish house, non-Jewish restaurant, then you go to a chametz house, a chametz restaurant. After 24 hours, according to the Torah, everything that was used more than 24 hours ago, right now, is already kasher LePesah. It's already kasher in general. But our Chachamim made a gezerah. The gezerah is they don't want us to confuse one thing with another. And therefore, even though I haven't used this pot in 2 days or 3 days or 5 days, I still have to pass it through fire or water before I will use it for something kasher or use it for Kasher LePesah. So far, are there any questions on what I said until now? Because this is the foundation.
Just to clarify, that last point is only if it's lechatechila, but b'di'avad, we need food could still be permissible, correct?
Very good. So Chacham Shimon is bringing up a point. Thank you for being in the shiur, Chacham Shimon. that is only true, ideally, meaning you can't take a pot that was used in the last 24 hours for meat, that was used 24 hours ago for meat, and make dairy in it intentionally. But if someone did that, then the food is completely kasher. He jumped the gun because I wanted to read that to you from the Rambam. I'll read it to you from the Rambam in a moment. But before that, any questions? That's okay. Any questions? Lagdil Torah la'adira. Any questions about what we said so far, about the foundation?
I have a question.
Please.
I just want to clarify. This is a prohibition to use these pots and pans, but it's not talking about the status of kashrut of the food, right?
Very good. So you, like Chacham Shimon, have the same mind, you're thinking the same way. We are talking about a prohibition of using the pot or the pan, not a prohibition of the food that was cooked in the pot or the pan once it has been used. Because everyone is bringing up this point, let's just read it together in the Rambam. Yes? Turn with me to page 3. Rambam says in the laws of forbidden foods, chapter 17, halajá 1, kdera shel cheres, a ceramic pot, pottery, shnitbashel b'basar nevela, in which was cooked meat of an animal that was not slaughtered properly, or basar shkatzim urmasim, or just in general non-kasher foods. Lo yivashel ba basar shechuta beoto hayom. Within 24 hours of cooking that non-kasher food, you're not allowed to cook kasher meat in that same pot. Ve'im bishel ba min basar tafshil asur. And if you did cook kasher meat in the non-kasher pot within the 24 hours, the meat that you cooked is not able to be eaten. That's if it's meat. Bishel ba min acher, if you cook something else inside of it, let's say rice you made in that pot, benoten tam. That depends on the amounts and the flavor. You could tell the flavor. Does the rice taste like, cockroach juice? No, it doesn't taste like that. Then it's okay to go. How do you test that? That's already a different question for another time. V'lo asra Torah, ela kedera bat yoma bivad. The Torah only prohibited a pot that was used in the last 24 hours. Ho'il v'adayin lo nifgam hashuman shnivla b'kedera. Because the fat that was absorbed in the pot still was not pagum, it didn't become bad flavored. U'midivrei sofrim lo yivashel ba leolam. But according to our rabbis, you're not allowed to cook in this pot forever, meaning here it's ceramic, so Rambam is assuming you cannot make it kasher, but it maintains its status forever. And therefore the Rambam says, לפיכך אין לוקחים כלי חרס ישנים מן הגויים ששמשו בהם בחמין, כגון גדרות וקערות לעולם, ואפילו היו שבויים בעבר, ואם לקח ובישל בהם מיום שני והלאה תבשיל מותר. Says the Rambam, you're not supposed to use this ceramic pottery of the non-Jews even after 24 hours. But what happens if you do it? You don't listen to Chachamim. You do it. It happens. What is the status of the food that was cooked in the pot? Mutar. Mutar. So let me give you a very practical scenario. You go to your non-Jewish friend's house. and what is something they can cook for you? Right? We mentioned laws of bishu last week. I'm going to go back to my salsa. I know we like salsa, okay? So, madbucha, yeah, we'll mix it up a little. Maybe in Mexico you have enough salsa, so we'll make Moroccan salsa. Yeah. They take tomatoes and onions and peppers and whatever else, and they cook it for you in their pot, their non-kasher pot. But they haven't used that pot in the last day, maybe even 2 days. What is the status of the salsa that was made in that pot? Why are you so scared? It's kasher. It's kasher. It's kasher. Now, you're not supposed to ask them to do that for you, but if they did it for you, then this is already a situation. There is no prohibition on eating the food. The prohibition was on using the pot. And this is a very important halajá to know. It's important to know this across the board, that after 24 hours, you are dealing with a completely different area of halajá than within the first 24 hours. And we talk about pots and pans and ovens and counters and everything being non-kasher, or it's all chametz, or it needs to be made kasher LePesah. You are not talking anywhere about biblical prohibitions. You are only speaking about rabbinic prohibitions. Now, is it important to observe rabbinic law? Absolutely. Our chachamim write in Masechet Berachot, Kol ha'over al divrei chachamim chayav mita. Somebody who violates a rabbinic law is liable for the death penalty. I'm not telling you they kill him, but it's an important thing to follow rabbinic law. But at the end of the day, how far do you take something is very much dependent. Is it a Torah law or is it a rabbinic law? Of course, I could just read to you 8 halachot in the Rambam and you will know everything you need to know. But why would I make your life so easy when we can complicate it with some extra details and we'll be able to learn some more things? Because likely, the conversation will never be as simple as the Rambam wants it to be, because the Jews around you, their life is already so complicated, we might as well read from the sources that they study, so we'll know what to do even according to them. Look with me on page 4. Maran, and the Shulhan Aruj writes in source 6, Halokach kelim. So Maran talks about making utensils kasher in 2 different places. One in the laws of making utensils kasher, in Yoreh De'ah, and once in the laws of making utensils Kasher LePesah, in the laws of Pesach and Orach Chaim. There are slight discrepancies between the two, and there's 2 ways to explain those. One, sometimes there are discrepancies in the Shulhan Aruj. There are many reasons that can be given, but very simply, the Shulhan Aruj is not a consistent book. As we know, it's built on tallying numbers, and if you study my class in the Shulhan Aruj, there are conflicts sometimes in the Shulhan Aruj. Sometimes things are written earlier, Maran changes his mind later. The second reason you may find conflicts, sometimes Pesach, the status of the halachot are a little more strict than by other things, and that's why you'll find sometimes discrepancies. I'm going for general rules. Halakha 6. Halokach kelim yushanim min hagoyim. A person who buys used utensils from the non-Jews. Kederech shenishtamesh behen hagoyim, kach hu hechsheran. The way that they were used to become non-kasher by the goyim, that's the way that you make them kasher. Lefichach, therefore, halokach kle tashmish yishanim shishtamesh bahem betzonen. If you buy utensils that non-Jews use for cold things, kegon kosot, utzlochiot, v'chayotze behen, like cups or small tea plates or the like, midichan, you wash them, וצריך לשפשפן היטב במים בשעת הדחה כדי להסיר ולמרק האיסור שעל גביהן, ואחר כך שוטפים במים מטבילן, והם מותרים. Says Maran, you just have to clean them from any non-kasher residue that might be there, and those cups are kasher completely. So what happens if I come to a hotel, or my Airbnb, or wherever you are, and they have over there drinking cups for cold drinks? They have their little plates for cookies, for whatever they are. How do I make them kasher to be able to use them? You just wash them. Wash them to make sure there's nothing kasher that is on them, and you could use them. Now, the Rama, they always tell you Ashkenazim are very strict in halajá. More strict than we are. They always look at halajá number 7. יש מקומות שנהגו היתר לשום יין בכלים שנסריהם מדובקים בחלב. There are communities among the Ashkenazim that were lenient to drink wine from barrels that were glued together with forbidden fat from animals. Mishtum sheteva hayayin livrach min hachelev. Because wine, in its nature, always separates itself from fat. והחלב נקרש ועומד בעצמו ואינו נוגע כלל ביין. And the fat is congealed, and it doesn't affect the wine. Even though they're touching, they're separate. Can you imagine somebody telling you that if the wine that you bring for kiddush was touching pig fat, it's okay. Because the pig fat and the wine were separate, there's nothing you have to worry about. This is written here by the Rama, but it's not my halajá now. Halajá 8, Maran says, לקח מהם כלים שנשתמש בהם בחמין, בין שם של מתכת או של עץ או אבן, מגעילן ואחר כך מטבילן, ואם הם של מתכת הם מותרים, ואם מטבילן ואחר כך יגעילן מותרים, ויש אומרים שצריך לחזור ולהטבילן. Maran tells you that you make it kasher with heat the same way it became not kasher, and he mentions that first you make the utensil kasher, and then you take it to the mikveh. What happens if you reverse the order? First you take it to the mikveh, and then you make it kasher? It's mutar. Some say that it's not okay. You have to go back and do it again. Rama gives us good advice in halakha number 9. En lahagid shum kli kol zman shehu ben yomo. It's best not to make any utensil kasher within 24 hours of it being used. Tell me why. Why is it better to wait after 24 hours?
Is this theoretical? The paleta comes out into the liquid and then goes, or the fire and then goes back into Shulhan Aruj once again.
Okay, so there's definitely a part of that. Let's just make it simple, Chacham Shimon. Within 24 hours, we're still talking about something that could be biblically prohibited. After 24 hours, this is all a rabbinic prohibition. You don't have to worry about the water becoming not kasher. You don't have to worry about the pot becoming not kasher. You don't have to worry about the person before you who put the pot in the water with pig and there wasn't enough water. You just don't have to worry. It makes life easier when you are do hechsher kelim after 24 hours. So rule number 1, I always tell people, wait 24 hours before you make a pot and pan kasher. Really, according to the Torah, it's already mutar. Maran is... Please, of course.
And I never saw what we're reading, that kelim, that you will use them in fire, you need to wash them. If I go to a restaurant non-kosher and I want to drink water, I need to wash first the glass?
That's a great question. Is the glass clean?
Yes.
So it was washed already, and you don't have to do it. It has to be clean.
Right.
Yes?
Okay. So also on an Airbnb?
Yeah, same thing. Very, very good. So when you get to the Airbnb or the hotel, you don't even have to wash it. I was just for the people who get worried. Meaning, the only hechsher of the glass is that it needs to be washed. It was already washed. There's no isur on the glass, so then what are you worried about? There's nothing left to be worried about. Now, I'm not even talking yet about the fact that it's glass, right? Just that it's a cup, that it's used for cold. It could be any material. That's a good point, what you're saying. I want to skip some of these things, because I'm going to read them again to you soon. Maran writes in halakha 12, Kol ha-kelim, all of the utensils, afilu shel cheres, even ceramic utensils, שנשתמש בהם חמץ בצונן, מותר להשתמש בהם מצה אפילו בחמין. This halakha goes both ways. But if you have a utensil that was used for hot chametz, yes, it was used for hot spaghetti, yeah, you can wash it out and use it for cold food on Pesaḥ, Kasher LePesaḥ. You don't have to even make it kasher at all. So all of your chametz utensils that you use them on Pesaḥ for cold don't require any hechsher at all. Aside from that, they need to be clean. Can you imagine? When I got married, my in-laws, Hashem should bless them, bought us beautiful sets of pots and pans and china and all kinds of things like that. And for whatever reason, my sensory issues bothered me. The chalavi set that they bought me, I couldn't eat. So my wife, she comes in the morning, like the first week or two when I got married, she comes to the dining room, she sees me sitting on the Shabbat table. I'm using the meat bowl with a meat spoon, and I'm having cereal with milk. And my wife's a big tzaddiker. She didn't get mad. She just asked me, what in the world are you doing? You forgot? I said, my dear wife, this is cold milk, it's cold cereal. It doesn't matter that yesterday you used it for chicken soup. You're allowed to eat cold out of something that is. So what about something that's not kasher? You want to go to the Airbnb and you want to use their ceramic bowls that they have there. Maybe they had chicken soup in them. If you're going to use it for cereal and milk, it's okay. Why? Why? Remember carefully now. Kishem shebul'o kach polto. The flavor only leaves the utensil the same way that it was put in. If you're using something cold in a bowl and there's hot absorptions in there, they're not going to come out in your food. Cold doesn't draw out flavor of the food, and therefore that is mutar. Now in source 13 and 14, there are certain things that cannot be made kasher. Maran lists them as ceramic and pottery utensils, and some other things made out of ivory. You know ivory, like the tusks of an elephant. Hopefully nobody has any of those things in their house. It endangers animals in the wild needlessly. At the end of the day, people are afraid to put their ceramic utensils in fire because they're going to break. Because they're going to break, they're not careful to make them kasher properly, and therefore our Chachamim told us that there are certain things you cannot make kasher because people don't put in the right effort to make them kasher.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Please.
We're talking about also keli sheni or just keli rishon?
Very, very good. We're going to talk about on page 10. No, 10. We're going to talk all about kli rishon, kli sheni. I'm going to get to those practical details in just a moment. I'm trying to build something, but you're right. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Let's look here on page 17. There's a very interesting Ashkenazi custom. It's important to know it because most people don't know it. Ashkenazim do not make utensils that halavi into besari, and they do not make besari utensils into halavi. Meaning, they do not. I'm going to use an English word that doesn't mean anything. It's called kashering. Some people say kasherize. None of these are words. I put a footnote here in the source, on the source sheet. Sometimes you have to use bad English words because there are no good words that I could use in English. So it's not grammatically correct. But they do not kasher utensils for meat to milk or milk to meat at all. That's the Ashkenazi custom. Look in source 17, source 18. Both the Magen Avaham and the Mishnah Berurah say that. Why? They're afraid that people might only have one pot and one pan, and all day long they're going to make it meat and milk, and meat and milk, and meat and milk. And what's wrong with that? I don't know. But they say you can't do it. I'll tell you what's wrong. People might come to make a mistake. The Chidah in source 19, he mentions that and he says that's true, but that's not a Sephardic custom. We don't have that custom. In source 20, the Kaf HaChaim, Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer, mentions that also. Chacham Ovadia Yosef in source 21 mentions that though there may have been some Sephardim who did that, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that's not the Sephardic custom. We have no such custom to not make things from meat to milk. You then see Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who's quite particular about this, but there's certain cases where he's lenient. The bottom line is, Ashkenazim in general tend not to make meat utensils into milk or milk utensils into meat, but they have a trick. Here's the trick. Ashkenazi Jews do make utensils from chametz to Pesaḥ. They do kasher them from chametz to Pesaḥ. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says, well, if they're going, not only him by the way, some other commentators use that also. If they're going to make the utensil Kasher LePesaḥ, then it becomes neutral anyways. So then they could take a meat utensil, make it Kasher LePesaḥ, and designate it for dairy, but only for Pesaḥ. Meaning they have to do it at the moment where they're kashering utensils for Pesaḥ. I'm going to tell you the truth, Chevra. They say that the letters of minhag, custom, are the same letters of Gehenom. That if you break a minhag, you're going to go to Gehenom. I understand this very differently. If I have to keep track of all the people's minhagim, I feel like I'm going to go to Gehenom. I have very little respect in general for minhagim. I can't keep track of what everybody does or doesn't do. I can only follow what halajá says. So because of that, if you want to take care of minhagim into consideration, you can. The simple halajá is that you are able to always make a utensil, kasher, besari, halavi, matzah, chametz, anything you want, whenever you want.
Rabbi,
Yes.
question. I just joined. What page are you on in the PDF?
Right now, page 6.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and a reminder that people writing in the chat box, I don't see the comments that you're saying, so if you like, you're welcome to say them or not. So ceramic, we mentioned, we don't make it kasher. In general, we try not lachshir. Haraperetz, my rabbi in source 27 on page 6, mentions there is a way to make ceramic kasher, especially with today's ceramic, and especially if people are going to lose money. But at the end of the day, the minhag seems to be that by ceramic people don't make it kasher. Now, when I say ceramic, what kind of ceramic am I talking about?
Unglazed, presumably.
Right, you know, like the flower pots you have in your backyard, the brown ones that are English, Hebrew say mechuspas. They're like textured. They absorb. If you pour oil, they'll get an oil stain. That's what we mean when we say cheres. I'm not talking about your coffee mugs with glaze on them. We'll talk about those in a minute. Talk to me about glass. What do you know about glass?
It's made from fire.
Okay, made from fire. I should make it more clear. When I say, what's the halachic status of glass?
So,
Binyamin Simcha is saying it doesn't absorb. My mother, what did you say, Ma? Needs hadacha. Okay, Chacham Shimon said. Yeah. Okay. So let's read Avod Rab Yonatan, source 28 on page 7. Shlosha devarim nemu b'chlei zchuchit. 3 things were said about glass utensils. Eino bolea, it does not absorb flavor. Ve'eino polet, and it does therefore not excrete flavor. Umareh kol ma shebatocho, and glass you can see everything that is inside of it. B'makom cham, cham. B'makom tzonen, tzonen. Where it's hot, the glass gets hot. Where it's cold, the glass gets cold. However, the first one is the most relevant for us here. Glass does not absorb. Glass does not give off flavor. Is this a matter of realistic dispute? Meaning, is there a reality which tells us that glass does absorb flavor? Or does glass not absorb flavor? Is it an observation of halajá or an observation of reality that Avod Rab Yonatan is recording? It's a fact, yes? If I have a glass utensil, but they added coloring to it, so it's now black, and I cannot see what's inside of it. Do I say, but Avod Rab Yonatan says the glass is see-through, but the glass is not see-through. No, but the halakha says the glass is see-through. Would I do that? I mean, some people would do that, but that's not how halakha works. It's an observation. Glass does not absorb flavor, it doesn't give off flavor. And essentially you find there are 3 different Jewish stances regarding glass in halakha. The first, Zechuchit ena bolat. In source 29, there's an excellent article by Rabbi Ohad Fixler. I don't know who he is, but he wrote an excellent article. That glass does not absorb. And as such, if glass does not absorb flavor, do you have to do anything to make it kasher? Aside from clean whatever's on it, residue, nothing. The Raviyah, the Eshkol, the Rashba, the Meiri, and more poskim say like that. The second opinion, glass absorbs flavor, and it's not able to be made kasher. For what reason? Glass is made out of sand, meaning it's like earthenware. And just like you cannot make earthenware kasher, you cannot make glass kasher. By the way, the famous opinion of certain Hasidim, which is why here in San Diego, many rabbis tell people that if you go to someone's kitchen and there's a glass stovetop, like a flat glass, you can never use it because it's not kasher, because glass cannot be made kasher. Great. Number 3, the third opinion is that glass absorbs, but you can make it kasher like metal, and that is the opinion of the Ra'ah and the Chidushei Ridba, the Ozarua. These are the 3 stances. What does Maran Shulhan Aruj hold? Look in source 30. Keli zechuchit, afilu machnisam lekiyum, ve'afilu mishtamesh behem bechamin. If you use glass utensils, even for hot food, en tzerichim shum hechsher she'enam bolim uvishtifa be'alma sagelehu. Says Maran, even if you cook in glass utensils, you have a glass oven pan, and you make food in there. I'm going to give you an example. You have a glass oven pan, and you make inside of it, the night before Pesach, you make inside of it meat. Now you wash it out. Tomorrow morning, the morning of Pesach, you can make inside of it cheese lasagna. Now the time for chametz is over, you can clean it out and make vegetables for the whole afternoon to eat. And then for the Leil HaSeder, you can make your food for Pesach and the Seder, and you don't have to do anything to that glass aside from make sure that it is clean. It's a halakha psuka. That's the law. That's what Maran writes. Rama. In steps the Rama and says, V'yesh machmirin. And some are strict. D'chlei zchuchit afilu hagala lo mahani lehu. that you cannot even make them kasher. Meaning glass becomes not kasher, and there's nothing you could do to make it kasher. V'chen haminhag be'Ashkenaz uv'mdinot elu. And this is the custom in Ashkenaz, in these countries. Look at source 33. Muri harav.
Chacham,
Yes.
how do we have the second and the third option? They are not against Avot Rab Yonatan.
Very good. So they're going to argue that the reality is different. They're not arguing about a halajá. The Avot Rab Yonatan is not mentioning a halajá. It's a reality. Like you're going to see in source 35, which I'll tell you in a minute. They're arguing about the reality of glass. Is glass absorbent or is it not absorbent? The first opinion says it doesn't absorb and therefore it doesn't become non-kasher. The second two agree that glass absorbs flavor, but they don't agree as to whether or not you can make it kasher. In my opinion, all of this is an exercise in futility because none of it is true. Glass doesn't absorb. Like you see, Harav writes on 33, "Uminhag Ashkenaz lachmir v'lo muvan minhagam." Only a Sephardic rabbi could write that. The custom of the Ashkenazim is to be strict, and I don't understand their custom. But here's very important. There was a famous Ashkenazi Chacham, Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was an Ashkenazi rabbi in Yerushalayim, and he writes something interesting. If you notice, the Rama only mentions that glass cannot be made kasher in the laws of Pesach. He doesn't mention that in the laws of regular kashering of utensils. So there's two ways to understand that. Either because he already said it by Pesach, he doesn't repeat it later, or it only applies to Pesach. It's an Ashkenazi stringency by Pesach, but not by any other time of the year. In any case, when I was learning Hilchot Kashrut by Rab Peretz, I had an Ashkenazi Chavruta, Rabbi Josh Gerstein, should live and be well, he's a rabbi in the Israeli army today, and Rab Peretz would not let us graduate that test unless we both promised him that if an Ashkenazi Jew were to ask us, can I use glass for everything, we have to tell him yes. If we were to tell him no, he's not going to let us pass the test. Fact is a fact is a fact. You can't change a fact.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what does the science say today?
We're going to talk about science in just a moment because, let's be honest, the science will tell us there are a lot more things than glass that are not absorbent to flavor. And you're going to get into a major problem of Jewish people who, I'm not going to go into that cliche of don't follow the science, but who, for whatever reason, are insistent that there are halachic realities versus realities. We're going to talk about that literally in a moment. It's going to be in less than a page from now. Let me talk about that then. Dissenting Sephardic opinions. The most famous, cheva, you can't ignore him, is the Rambam. The Rambam seems to imply in the laws of kelim, of machalot asurot, that glass is like metal and it requires hechsher. Harav Kapach in source 36 writes that according to the Rambam, whether it's regular kashrut or it's kashrut for Pesach, glass must be made kasher like you would metal. Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu in source 37 and 38 and 39, he took Rambam very far and said that glass mamash becomes not kasher, and he blamed it on all kinds of realities of today where the glass is not pure and the glass has other materials added to it and all kinds of things like that. Rabbi David Shalush says the same thing. Chacham Ovadei Yosef quotes Rabbi Yehuda Masselton, who says the same thing. Rabbi Shalom Masas says no, it doesn't work like that. He says that both in source 42 and in source 43. Rabotai, that brings me to page 9 because this is very important. Does glass absorb or does it not absorb? And if I could prove to you the glass does not absorb, would it change anyone's mind as to its halachic status? So how do you test if something absorbs flavor or not? Can you give me a test? Those of you who've been in my shiurim, you might know.
You can put hot pepper on it.
That's my son Elchanan. He's been coming to my classes since he was born. Okay, Elchanan, I think I take hot peppers. What is the spiciest hot pepper in the world right now?
A ghost pepper.
A ghost pepper, very good. Now I take a ghost pepper and I chop it up and I'm going to cook it inside of this glass pan. Okay? How hot? The highest your oven will go. Now I'm going to take out the peppers. I'm going to clean it out with soap and water. Nothing fancy. Soap and water. I'm going to fill up that pot with water, that pan with water. I'll put it in the oven. I let the water boil. When I drink that water, will I taste the ghost pepper?
No.
Does everyone else agree? Is there anyone who disagrees? Good. If you do that experiment and you come out that you taste the pepper, Haraperet says, I'll give you 100 shekels. I'll give you $100. That's how sure I am. I'm sure that if you take these peppers and put them in glass and you clean out the glass, that there is nothing left in terms of flavor in the next round of cooking. Now, you know that that's not true with everything. So, I remember when I was in yeshiva in Jerusalem, they would give us these plastic cups, like orange and red and green. And you could smell what people drink, and then for breakfast, you could smell what kind of toothpaste. The last guy who drank from them was disgusting, those cups. I don't even know who drank from those cups, but they have such cups, and I hope they only exist in boys' yeshivot, because, I don't know, I can't imagine anywhere else that they could get away with that. Maybe in prison. Those cups, okay, they have a problem with kashrut status, but the glass that you use doesn't absorb flavor. Tell me about stainless steel. I have a stainless steel pot. Now I'm going to boil ghost peppers in the stainless steel pot. I'm going to wash it out with soap and water. I'm going to boil water in that pot. Will I taste the ghost pepper in that water? No. It's simply not. It doesn't. Harav Dov Leo, who was the rabbi of Kiryat Arba, Hebron. Harav Dov Leo, he's a friend of Moria Rav Yaakov Peretz. He actually had a group of his students run a real science experiment on this, and they came back to him that the glass, the metal, the stainless steel, does absorb some fraction of a fraction. Here, what are they right here? If someone is unmuted, if you mind muting yourself, that'd be great. Rav Dov Lior on page 9, he says in the third paragraph, "B'totzaot habdika shenarcha b'ma'abada," in the laboratory test that we did, nimtza shebili'a b'chlei nirosta, that the stainless steel absorptions, hi b'sivot 1 ל-170,000. It is 1 out of 170,000. That's how much is absorbed in the wall of a stainless steel utensil. זוהי בליעה מזערית ביותר, ולכן בפשטות נראה שכלי נירוסטה הם כלי זכוכית. Says Rabbi Dov Lior, therefore it's a fact that stainless steel should be treated like glass. Now he writes at the bottom that he's afraid to say this on his own, because people can make mistakes based on this, and therefore he says he wants 2 other poskim to agree with him in order that people can follow this in halajá. I didn't follow up with this, but for many, many, many years, Harav Peretz would tell us when people ask you questions in halajá, if it's stainless steel, it's all okay, but pretend that there's another reason why you're being lenient. About 6 years ago, Harav Peretz got up in public and he said, how much can I lie already in the Beit HaMikdash? Stainless steel is like glass. Stainless steel can be used for meat, for milk, for chametz, for Pesaḥ, for everything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need a hechsher. All it needs to be is clean. Rabotai, I'm going to tell you now something that is not, it's not a chidush what I'm telling you. It's not a novel idea. The idea is that instead of focusing on glass, on metal, on pottery, on wood, on ivory, don't think like that. Chachamim were not giving you categories based on the material. Chachamim were giving you categories based on their ability to absorb flavor and give off flavor. Glass is the category of things that absorb and do not give off flavor. Metal, the category of things that absorb, give off flavor, but can be made kasher that way. Ceramic, things that absorb flavor, but either they cannot let out their flavor or they will not be kashered properly and they'll break. And therefore, any material today, which you know does not absorb flavor and does not give off flavor, that material should be treated like glass. I should have said this in the beginning, but I didn't want you guys to hang up the Zoom call on me. This is very simple then. In our current reality, who asked me now about the reality, about how there could be 2 different Pesach halachá? Where did he go? Jaime, was that you?
Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, did I say your name correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, you're right. Meaning, our scientific reality is that 80%, 90%, I would argue, of the utensils that we use in our homes, that they use in factories, that we use in cooking and anything to do with food preparation, does not absorb flavor and does not give off flavor. The laws of kashrut must be completely readjusted to fit the reality that we're living in. It's not that Maran is wrong. It's not that Avot de Rab Yonatan is right. It's not an argument of Rambam with the Raviyah, with the Rashba. It's nothing to do with that. All of those chachamim, were they here today and would see our glass today, our stainless steel today, would rule that all of these things are not bolim and not poltim. That's very simple. None of them would argue with reality. And therefore, you don't have to take my word for it. In my house, if you'll come to my home, like Mori Harav Peretz, I have one stainless steel pot that I use for meat, that I use for milk, that I use for chametz, that I use for Pesaḥ, and I do nothing to make it kasher except for to clean it in between. Which avirah did I violate? Absolutely nothing. Now that you know that, start thinking about your kitchen. And start thinking, which of the utensils in my kitchen really even have problems in the first place? But I see what time it is. And I want to summarize the halachot in a practical regard. We can take the last little bit of the shiur.
Rabbi,
Yes.
sorry, how do you explain the pasuk? Kol davar asher yavo ba'esh.
What is there to explain in the pasuk?
Because you're saying that the Torah does explicitly say that there are things that need to be kasher, make it kasher.
Right. All the things that absorb flavor through fire must have their flavor expunged through fire. That's what Chachamim tell us. That's why if the tam is pagum, technically the Torah doesn't require it to be made kasher at all. It's only the rabbis who did that. Right?
So they had different materials then.
No, we have the same materials. There are still materials today that absorb or don't absorb. Why don't we say that glass needs to go through fire? Why don't we say glass needs to go through fire? Because glass doesn't absorb. What about the pasuk? The pasuk wasn't talking about glass.
If they had the materials they used were more common to absorb than what we use today.
Look, if you look at a museum, you go to a museum and you see the metal from 100 years ago, you see the knives 100 years ago, you'll be they have like holes in them, mamash, like they're porous. You could see it with your eyes. We don't even have in our kitchen, even the non-stainless steel metals that we use are very hard, dense metals that I'm not going to tell you they're like stainless steel. I don't want to have my head cut off right now for more than I need to. But at the end of the day, they're definitely not the materials that were used even 100 years ago, let alone 2,000 years ago.
I believe the pasuk also relating to if you buy something from the goy.
Yeah, but meaning it absorbs flavor. Here we're talking about a reality where the flavor is not absorbed. It doesn't require hechsher in the first place. It wasn't used for something. It doesn't retain any flavors of the non-kasher food.
It does preface that rule with a list of various forms of metal that are specifying for these materials.
Right. Though Chacham Shimon, our Chachamim seem to say that it was listing common materials, but it's a generic on clay matachot in general. It's not just those metals. I mean, if I don't have a gold pot, it still would apply, even if it's a metal not listed there. Okay, right. Someone tried to say something, but they got spoken over.
Yeah,
I was going to
how do we
say.
know?
Oh. Go.
Yeah, so how do we know that the halajá is speaking about if absorbs or not? Maybe the takana was on the material. How do we know that it's not on the material?
By seeing what the Chachamim wrote about glass. Maran Shulhan Aruj. He says that glass it doesn't need to be hechsher at all because it's not bolan, it's not polet. I mean, the whole logic of hechsher kelim is about absorption of flavor. Tam ki ikar. Everything has to do with flavor. That's the bottom line in the laws of kashrut. If the flavor is not there, there is no independent gezerah to pass things through fire, regardless of the flavor absorption. There's simply no such gezerah. That's the literal understanding of these halachot.
Okay.
And therefore, when that doesn't apply, nothing else applies.
Right. I was just going to put out there that in the modern kitchen, the only common utensil that you will find a lot of people who have, if they're into cast iron utensils, cast iron is very absorbent.
Good. Cast iron is very absorbent. But cast iron is the metal that our chachamim were familiar with. You ever use cast iron? You can wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it your whole life, and it's part of what it does is it absorbs. Wood may be similar. Let's quickly look at the methods of making something kasher. So, Yes.
Right. Sorry. Why do you want to explain that? You're explaining that the types of materials that they mentioned are sugim of the things that absorb as like the thing they talked about. Why can you just say that they had different materials at that time, and now we have different materials today, and what they talked about was specific materials, but from their time.
Fine.
I don't have to get into.
You could say that also. You could say it too. Maran's knife is not my knife. Chazal's pot is not my pot. Okay, now Chaim is happy. So now I'm going to talk about the haksharat kelim. Okay, we have here a number of different ways to make something kasher. I'm going to say the categories out loud first, and then we'll talk about how to do them practically. So the first, and someone remind me not to skip sources 45 and 46. I just first want to go to 49. You know, it's not important. Let's start with 45. Maran writes in Orach Chaim, Kol keli holchin bo achar rov tashmisho. Every utensil, we make it kasher based on the majority of its use. Hilkach therefore ka'arot, אף על פי שלפעמים משתמשים בהם בכלי ראשון על האש, כיוון שרוב תשמישן הוא בעירוי שמראה עליהן בכלי ראשון, כך הוא הכשרן. Maran says that all of the utensils, how do you determine what kind of heat it needs to make it kasher? What if you sometimes use a utensil for hot and sometimes use it for cold? Give an example. You use this cup. I once made tea in this cup. I use it for cold water all the time, but I once made tea because I ran out of teacups. When I want to make this cup kasher, and forget what it's made out of right now. Let's say it was a metal cup. Yes? Would I make it kasher through heat or through washing it alone? That was a question. Washing it. Why? Because you go based on the majority of its uses. Look in halajá 47. Kol klei hashtiya, all of the drinking utensils. Ben sochiot, ben kosot, whether the cups or the plates, mutarim b'shtifa, they become mutar when you wash them. Ben shem shel zechuchit, ben shem shel etz, ben shem shel matechet, ben shem shel cheres, whether they're glass or wood or metal or ceramic. Ve'af al pi shlefamim notlim behem lechem cham. Even though sometimes you have hot bread in them. כיוון שרוב תשמישן אינו אלא בצונן, סגה בשטיפה, שלא הלכו בכל כלי אלא אחר רוב תשמישו. You remember that we're only kashering utensils now? 24 hours later, because of a rabbinic law? The rabbis only made the law about the majority of its uses. If I use my utensils once for something hot that was chametz, when it comes to Pesach, I only need to make it kasher by washing it. Because most of the use of this utensil is with cold. The Ashkenazim don't agree. Source 46, but it doesn't matter right now in that situation. Or source 48. Look here about the methods of making things kasher. You have a few. Libun. Libun is a method of making things kasher through dry heat. You make something in a barbecue. Yeah, that's the epitome of libun. It's in a barbecue, it's with fire, there's no liquids there, there's no oil, there's no water, it's not cooking, it's roasting, mamash, on a fire. Those things require hechsher in a fire. You have things like pots. Pots are, you boil an egg, you boil spaghetti, those are things that are used with liquids, and therefore they require what we call hagala. Look by source 52, hagala. Now hagala has different levels. Hagala has levels of, there's the pot that's on the fire, that's one level of heat. There's the pot off the fire, another level of heat. There's the ladle you put in and then you put in the bowl. The soup that's in your bowl is not the same as the soup in the ladle. It's not the same as the soup that's in the pot. These are different levels. Like Rabbanit Michal mentioned, kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. There are different levels. And hadacha finally is cleaning them, washing them. So let's look at Maran in 49. Maran said, kelim, shemishtamshim behem al yidei ha'ur. Utensils that we use with fire. כגון שיפודים והסקלאות וכיוצא בהם, like skewers in the fire. צריכים ליבון. We have to do ליבון. והליבון הוא עד שיהיו ניצוצות ניתזים מהם. There has to be sparks flying out of this material. And this is where you find the Jewish obsession with blowtorches. I don't know where it came from, I don't know how it happened, but Jews have this idea that in order to make things kasher, they have to run around with blowtorches. They look like superheroes in a movie. I came to a hotel there was a wedding and the mashgiach, he quit, and there's people getting married and they really needed help. She was a classmate of mine. I said, I'll help make the wedding kasher. Don't worry, I'll show up. So I came to the back of the kitchen. I said, I'm the guy who's going to make the wedding kasher, and the manager of the kitchen threw me out of the kitchen. So what happened? He said, we used to have a Pesaḥ hotel that would come here. And those guys came with their blowtorches, and these are very fancy hotels. They have these glass cubes they put food platters on top of. And they have all kinds of very fancy... The guy came with a blowtorch and blowtorched the whole kitchen and broke everything. And what else he broke? There's a dishwasher. It's like a plastic, like an escalator. It moves. It's like a wheel. You put dishes here and it moves it to the other side. It's plastic. The guy came with a blowtorch and he blowtorched it and it melted into one piece of plastic that couldn't move anymore. And he wouldn't pay for it. Because that's the way we make things kasher. Chilul Hashem. Now I walked into a trap. But today, our utensils, you're not using them with blowtorch, heat, fire. Very few of you are cooking outside of the fire. Rabbi Yitzchak Abadi writes in source 50, Kederot, pots, ששמשו בהם על האש, that we use them on the fire. האם אפשר לבנם על ידי שמכניסים אותם בתנור גדול בחום גבוה, ואם כן, כמה זמן צריכים לשהות שם? Can I make my utensils that require libun, kasher inside of an oven? Says the Rav Abadi, אפשר לבנם בתנורים שלנו, וניחם בתנור לכל היותר כחצי שעה בחום גבוה, והוא די והותר. You can take your utensils that require hechsher in the fire, you put them inside of your oven on the highest heat that it goes, and half an hour is more than enough to make it kasher. And so, I, the hero, when I first got married, I took my wife's pots and pans, and I put them all in the oven. I said, I'm going to save you all the work of hot water and boiling pots, and I put it all in the oven, and I put on the oven for half an hour on 500 degrees, and all of my wife's handles of her pots fell off. And every time, until today, she burns her fingers when she's taken off the lid of a pot. She always remembers my gift to her when we first got married, that I helped her with a shortcut of making everything kasher in the oven. You want to make sure you don't put rubber in the oven. You want to make sure you don't put anything that could burn in the oven. But the easiest way to do libun is inside of your oven to make things kasher. Things that were used in a higher heat, like in the fire itself, in the barbecue, likely you have to use that in the barbecue. But for the very least, the pots and the pans and the things that you use in your oven, you're able to make them kasher in your oven. Don't be afraid. Source number 52. kelim shnishtamesh behem mechamin, kefi tashmishan hechsheran. Anything that you use with heat, you make them kasher the way they were made. So, if you use them in a kli rishon, you make them kasher in a kli rishon. Kli sheni, kli shlishi. Irui. I'll explain. You have your pot of chicken soup. You want to make that Kasher LePesah. What do? You take that pot and you put it inside of another pot of boiling hot water that is bigger than it, and you would dunk it inside, and that makes your pot kasher. That's something that was used on the stove, has to be made kasher on the stovetop. The second, kli sheni. Kli sheni, let's another example of kli rishon. Let's say the ladle of the soup that you mix the soup with. How does that become chametz? In the pot. So you have to make it kasher in a pot on the fire. But what about the kli sheni? What is kli sheni? Kli sheni, let's argue it's really a kli shlishi, but let's pretend. Kli sheni is the bowl of soup. Do you agree with me? Kli sheni is a bowl of soup? Somebody have a better kli sheni for me?
You poured boiling hot water from making pasta into a metal strainer. The water hits the strainer directly from the pot.
That's actually called an irui mikli rishon. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to make that kasher by pouring boiling hot water on top of it. The bottom line is, the way that it was used is the way you make it kasher. In my opinion, the dishwasher that you have in your kitchen, everything that requires halajá, irui, kli sheni, all of your plates, your bowls, your silverware, not the cooking utensils, the eating utensils. If you put them in the dishwasher clean, on a hot cycle of water, that makes all of those things kasher LePesah.
But one question.
Yes.
If you sometimes use the silverware like a spoon to try the soup.
Answer your question. Answer your question.
If you usually use use the silverware as a kalishani, you have to kasherize it as a kalishani.
Right. You don't have to do it like this sometimes when you use it in a pot.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
That's exactly the rule why Maran made that rule. That's perfect question. Lastly, halajá. Halajá is like we mentioned about glass, anything used for cold. All of those things, you just have to make sure there is no mamashut, there's no actual chametz or pig or whatever, meat or milk that's on those things. And therefore, you just have to wash them, and you could do that in any which way that you want. What about a large utensil? It's too big. You have a pot that's so big you can't put it inside of another pot. You could fill it up all the way until the top, and you let it boil over. That's on source 54. Some people put a rock inside of it, a hot rock, so that it boils it over. You can also take that pot and put it inside of the oven if your oven is big enough. Now that you know the three methods, which is libun, hagala, and halajá, you can now think about everything in your kitchen. But before that, there's one last halajá to know. Source 56. Noten tam nifga mutar. Bad flavors are mutarim, right? We said that already at the beginning of the shiur. What does that mean? Look in halajá vav in the left column on page 11. Stam kle goyim hem becheskat she'enam bnei yoman. The average pot and pan of a non-Jew, by the way, also of a Jew. Think about all the pots and pans you have in your kitchen. Have you used most of them in the last 24 hours? No. So the status, all the pots and pans in your kitchen are considered that they're not bnei yoman. Unless you know for sure you used it in the last 24 hours, you treat all pots and pans like they were not used in the last 24 hours. And that means that if a non-Jew cooks for you food that they're allowed to cook for you in a non-kasher pot or pan that hasn't been used in the last 24 hours, what is the status of that food?
Kasher.
The food is kasher. Now, you're not allowed to tell them, look in halajá vav in the second paragraph, you're not allowed to say, go make me vegetables in your non-kasher pot. But the same is true with the Jewish kitchen. Halajá zayin, that stam kelim enam bnei yoman. So if you by accident cooked food for Pesaḥ, no, not Pesaḥ, not a good example. You cook by accident meat in your milk pot or milk in your meat pot, and it wasn't used in the last 24 hours. What is the status of your food? Kasher. It's kasher. You don't have to worry about it. So already 90% of your halachic questions that you call the rabbi to ask probably already went out the window. Last but not least, I gave you the last pages of my book, which tells you a list of all the things you need to be kasher, but if I'm going to summarize them in 5 steps. Every utensil in the world that you want to make kasher, it's your whole kitchen. You want to make it kasher by cleaning it well. You can't have anything non-kasher stuck to it. The second, you should wait 24 hours. Do you have to? No, you should. You should wait 24 hours. The third, if it's Pesach, you should make it kasher before the afternoon. Why? In the afternoon already you're not allowed to eat chametz. It becomes a little more complicated. Halajá number 4. You should apply that method of heat. So you want to leave that pot in the water till the material gets hot. You want to leave the oven on until the oven gets hot. And lastly, there is a minhag. Maran mentions a minhag. To wash the utensil with cold water when you're done to get rid of any type of non-kasher thing stuck there. It's not a halajá. It's a custom, but it's a good one to know. So clean, wait 24 hours, and then apply the method of kashering that you need. If you'll give me 5 more minutes, that's all I need. I want to walk with you through all of the utensils inside of your house right now. Pots and pans. They're used with liquids. You make them kasher through hagala. Ashkenazim are strict about pans that they should be done with libun, but at the end of the day, they can also agree to hagala. Silverware requires hagala, nakli sheni, or irui. Serving utensils, also hagala. Cups, you just have to wash them. Skewers require fire. Grills require fire. My opinion is that barbecues are very hard to make Kasher LePesah. You can never really clean them well enough, and then you have to burn them well enough. You can, it's not impossible. It's just a little more complicated than anything else. An oven. Maran and the Shulhan Aruj, we learned that last week together. An oven that's big enough does not become meat or dairy. The same thing with Pesach, and therefore really you don't have to make your oven kasher at all. If for whatever reason you want to be strict, to clean your oven, and then just put it on for half an hour at the highest temperature, not self-clean. Self-clean burns down houses. It's very dangerous. Many people die from the self-clean setting on the oven. But high, 500, that's where your oven goes. Make it kasher for half an hour. Your microwave. A microwave, when you heat up something in the microwave and you touch the inside of the microwave, does it burn your hand? No, that's how microwaves work. That's the whole thing of a microwave. And because of that, microwaves do not need hechsher at all. You just have to clean them. If you want to be strict, you can boil a cup of water to make steam if it makes you feel good. But at the end of the day, your microwave just has to be clean. I once went to a dormitory of yeshiva guys and they wanted to heat up something for me in a microwave. And when they opened the microwave, I saw it was like all the colors of the rainbow. Different colors, mold, different foods that were left. It was disgusting. Those people, that microwave is not... I mean, it's not a matter of kashrut there, it's a matter of public safety, but that microwave is not what I'm talking about. In your house, your microwave is kasher, your microwave is parve. A toaster oven. A toaster oven that I'm referring to is the kind that looks like a miniature oven. You have to make it kasher by turning it on to the higher setting for enough time to make it hot. The toaster with slices, I don't know what you could be toasting on Pesach in there. Maybe some gluten-free pancakes from Trader Joe's. Okay, so then you have to get all the crumbs out. In my opinion, a toaster is one of the few things you might want to have a separate one for Pesach. It's complicated to get in there and make it Kasher LePesah. A blender just has to be cleaned. It doesn't matter if it's glass or plastic. It matters that you clean it well. You can run a cycle of water and soap in there and you should be fine. Food processor is similar. Coffee maker does not have, there's nothing you put in your coffee maker that's chametz. Your hot water urn does not have to be made kasher. Your tea kettle, your storage jars, your plastic containers that are of good quality, also they're the same thing. Your plata, you probably always put foil on it, but you want to plug it in, you want to wipe it down and plug it in, you could do that if it makes you feel good. Your stovetop, you don't eat from it. You know that? Most people don't eat from their stovetop. So you can just wipe it down and it's kasher LePesah. If it's glass, you don't have to worry about it at all. If you have a metal one, so you could turn it on for about 15 minutes, let it get hot after you clean it, and that's fine. In general, just like you don't have separate stovetops for meat and milk, some people do, but most of us don't. The only halajá is that if you use all the stovetop for meat and milk, if it's not glass, and let's say spaghetti falls out on the stovetop, you don't eat it. Why? Because maybe it fell in a place that had splatter both of meat and milk, we don't eat that. But for Pesach, let's say you wipe it down and you burn it, that's more than enough. Sinks. What do you have to do for your sink on Pesach? They sell these plastic inserts that you put inside of your sink. That plastic insert is terrific for collecting bacteria, but it serves no kashrut purpose at all whatsoever. And therefore, all you have to do with your sink, just leave it alone. And you want to wash it, you can wash your sink. But you don't eat out of your sink. You don't cook in your sink, you don't eat from your sink, there's nothing to do with your sink. You want to wash it, but that's the only thing you have to do. Dishwasher. There are a few opinions. The simple one is just run a clean cycle empty cycle of soap and water and it should be fine. Countertops. Tell me why people cover their countertops. I'm going to leave that to the end. Let's get countertops will be my last halakha. Tables. The tables that Maran talks about used to have to make it kasher LePesah. People used to eat on the table. Today nobody eats on their table like that. So you just have to make sure you have a clean table. Shalom Aleichem. Mixing bowls, crock pots, I have it all here. Rolling pins, drying racks. Drying racks are where you dry the dishes. You don't have to make it kasher LePesah. Chargers. Chargers are the things you go under the plate. Now it could be you want to wipe them down if there's any chametz, but hopefully you do that after you use them anyways. Refrigerators and freezers, there's nothing you have to do there. I see people line it with contact paper or cardboard. The only thing that is good for is to break your refrigerator. Your refrigerator requires a very healthy amount of airflow to keep it cold, and if you start stuffing paper and aluminum foil and cardboard in there, you'll break your refrigerator, and then chaval, chasa Torah mamonam shel Yisrael, the Torah worries about the money of the Jewish people. Let's last talk about countertops. Do you have meat and milk countertops? Please don't say yes. If the answer is yes, please don't say yes. There's no such thing as a meat or a milk countertop. It doesn't exist. Simply, the reality is very simple. There is no chance in the world. What's the problem? Maybe I'm going to have meat. I want to take my brisket out of my pan and smack it down on my marble countertop with no cutting board, with no plates, Then I'm going to slice the meat boiling hot on the countertop and put it back in my pot. And then within 24 hours, I'm going to drop milk in the same spot where the meat was, and it's going to pull out meat flavor from the countertop, and I'm going to lean down and lick the milk off the countertop or drink it with a straw from the countertop. What is the situation? in which the food on your countertop is going to affect the status, the absorption of the countertop is going to affect the status of your food. Nothing. Don't cover your countertops for Pesach. The only thing you should do, make them clean, like you make them clean every week for Shabbat. Wipe them down with some cleaning agent and Shalom in Israel. There is no reason. And so back to my initial start of this class. When we go to people's houses and we see that for Pesach, they cover the light bulbs, aluminum foil, they put inserts in the sink, they put socks on the faucet. I would tell you that if you go, listen carefully what I'm telling you now. If you go to somebody's house who puts aluminum foil on the countertop on Pesach, you probably should not eat there on Pesach. Why? Why am I being a fanatic? Because likely these people have no understanding of Hilchot Pesach. And so probably they don't actually know what there's... Chametz, they don't know anything about it. How do I know they don't know anything about Chametz? Because look at all the things they're doing. What does it have to do with Chametz? Why are the handles of your refrigerator covered in aluminum foil? Why? Meaning you're an Am Haaretz. You're an ignoramus. What do you know about Pesach? How can I trust you about Pesach? And so it's the opposite. It's not, if they come to my house, they see I don't have aluminum foil, they cannot eat in my home. The opposite is true. When I come to your house, and I see, not you, when I come to their house, and I see all these ridiculous things that are done, all that it tells me is this is a person who's alone in a car, who's wearing 2 masks and a face protector because they don't know what they're afraid of. And that person is wonderful, but I'm not going to get my medical advice from them. That person is wonderful, but I'm going to ask a few questions before I eat food that might be chametz inside of their house. And what I'm telling you now is very, very factual. Before I got married, my last Pesach before I got married, I was in Israel with my mother, went to a house of Jews that recently became observant, and they were very sweet people. They hosted me very beautifully, but a special category of Am Haaretz, like a special category. They were convinced that they were Hasidim. Chacham Shimon, the story is for you. And so they didn't let us eat the matzah with anything, because you cannot mix matzah with liquids. They also didn't let us eat any of the food that had kosher symbols on it, because it all said for eaters of kitniot only. So the only thing they served in their house on Pesach was matzah and hummus. Why? Because hummus was not a liquid, and matzah you could eat, and they didn't know according to them, you can't eat kitniot of hummus, and they didn't know according to them, you can't mix them. So I had a decent Pesach. The whole Pesach, I ate slices of matzah with hummus. That was my Pesach. Sometimes you go to someone's house, it's not that they're extra kosher, it's that they're extra ignorant. Extra ignorant does not make you observant of halajá. And to summarize everything we learned today, to make your kitchen Kasher LePesah should take you an hour. 2 hours if you're very slow. It's why Chachamim told us to start cleaning our house for Pesach when? The night before Pesach. Why would they tell us the night before Pesach? Don't they know that we have to spend 3 weeks after Purim getting rid of everything? We have to get rid of the chametz and make our utensils Kasher LePesach. It is so easy. This is a holiday of freedom. Remember that always. B'ezrat Hashem, I will stick around to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much for learning with me today. B'ezrat Hashem, next week I invite you to learn with us a final class all about the evolution of the minhag of kitniot in a class titled Kaleidoscopic Kitniot. At School of Mitzvot, I'm here for as long as you need me.